Hello, nerds.
Hello, nerds.
Joe Sanberg, welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I know we're both in sunny California. It's sunny up in Northern California. How's it going down in LA?
It's a little overcast today, but you know what they say. It's always sunny in Los Angeles.
I love it. I love it. So for the audience who may be less familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dig into more specific policy things.
I'm someone who gets outraged when I see injustice, and I try and do what I can to fix it. And I've been that way since I was a little kid. My mom raised me by herself in Southern California, and when I was a teenager, we lost our home to foreclosure. So I know a lot of the issues firsthand that so many Americans are facing. And the biggest thing that I've noticed since I was a kid is that more and more people are facing this, that we have a nation that is really gripped by poverty. Statistics always tell you that there's a middle class, but nothing that we can note about middle class life, which is having some financial security, characterizes the way almost anyone lives in this country anymore. When almost 8 out of 10 people live paycheck to paycheck, that you don't have a middle class. You have a massive poverty crisis. I went to Harvard and got a lot of financial aid, worked multiple jobs when I was in college, and was an organizer and an activist and a rabble-rouser. And when I was graduating, the reality of wanting to support my mom and provide financial security to her sparked me to start my career on Wall Street. I stayed a little bit longer than I think I had expected, and I frankly lost a little bit of myself temporarily during my 20s when I was on Wall Street, got disconnected from my core values. And when I was 29, realized that I wasn't living the way that I think I was intended to live. So moved back to California, and for the last 11 years have been living in Southern California and trying to use the skills I learned on Wall Street to build organizations in the private and public sectors that help people and make the world a better place. In the public sector, I focused on creating the earned income tax credit in California, and we've turned our success on the lobbying side there into a big community organizing effort. My nonprofit, Golden State Opportunity, serves over 3 million low-income Californians every year with social services. And then in the business side, I've built a company called Aspiration, which delivers impact automation services attached to your financial products. So on the surface, people come to Aspiration for banking accounts and investment accounts. But what really makes the services of Aspiration special is that they're attached to all kinds of ways that you can experience your everyday financial products while also having a positive impact in the world. We have something called the Aspiration Impact Measurement that makes it easy to see how the places where you spend money treat their workers and the environment. One of the things that we overlook as change makers is that every day as consumers, we spend $35 billion. And imagine if we used even a portion of that $35 billion of daily consumption towards positive change. As consumers, we're underestimated participants in democracy when it comes to the power of our wallets. And we also have this great feature that allows you to donate the spare change of every one of your debit card transactions to planting a tree. Aspiration's planted 3 million trees in just the last 5 months. More to come on that soon. And so the whole spirit is around how do you show people a different use case for their financial products, that it's not just where you receive your payroll direct deposit, but it can also be a vessel for creating positive change in the world. And so across those two different factors, I'm really animated by trying to do everything I can to help out and make the world better while I'm here.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, I would argue either the nonprofit or the for-profit alone are super impactful. The fact that you're doing both is pretty impressive. So congrats on pushing forward on multiple fronts there. And I should also call out, I want to thank Laura Lane, one of the Nerds for Humanity channel members, for connecting us, because I was not as familiar with your work as she was. Tell us a little bit, Joe, about that transition from Wall Street to your current efforts. Like, that is not common. The common path would have been to climb the corporate ladder and, make partner and, have a nice golf club membership and 3 cars and a summer house, that kind of thing. What was it that caused you to kind of take a different course? Was there a specific thing that happened? It was like a turning point, or had it been building over time?
It was returning to my faith. I was raised Jewish. I'm really proud to be a progressive Jew. And that means a lot to me. And what it means in particular is that we're all created with meaning and purpose, and that how we choose to live our lives, how we treat others matters. And I think that that's a perspective that can resonate with anyone of any belief system or any faith. I honor people who believe in God from different perspectives, and those who don't believe in God. I think what matters is that we treat others and take on our own shoulders the responsibility for making the world as good as possible, and understand that what we do with our lives matters. And I realized that I'd strayed from that in my 20s. I think I went to Wall Street with the right purpose, which was to take care of my mom, but I stayed far longer than was necessary to earn the amount of savings needed to take care of my mom. And I got caught up into the greed is good part of Wall Street. And I'm fortunate that I was able to wake up and have a self-awareness at an early point in my life. And that's the answer, really. It's for me, it was about my faith and connecting into the kind of life and person I want to be, and the kind of impact I want to have on the world. We never know how long we're here for, but I think with the time we have to do everything we can with the skills that we've been gifted to heal the world and help others. There's just an incredible amount of suffering around us, and it's up to us to heal that suffering in all of the ways, large, small, and medium, that each of us can do in our daily lives.
It reminds me of when I was coming out of undergrad. I had interviewed with a number of banks on Wall Street, ended up going and consulting, slightly less financially focused, but still part of that corporate scene. One of the things I heard from a banking partner that I thought was pretty compelling was he said, yes, of course we make a lot of money here, but we're also part of a system that efficiently distributes capital to help power innovation and provide jobs. And then obviously in today's kind of political world, you often hear about job creators and capitalism. Like, how do you square that? Do you feel, obviously the folks that you work with on Wall Street, they were doing some good work. Like, how do you think about the impact versus of what you do today versus what you could have done, doing more IPOs or issuing corporate debt or deals, whatever area you were focused on?
Well, I think capitalism has a ton of potential. I'm a capitalist, and I think the problem is capitalism has been steered in the wrong direction. I think capitalism is amoral. It's not inherently bad, nor is it inherently good. It's dependent on the choices that the participants in it make. And you rightly noted that the financial markets have the potential to move capital around to areas of innovation. And I think where those capital markets have fallen short in the last several decades is they've moved capital to places that are solely about near-term profit maximization instead of about value creation. And I think what's pissed people off about wealth in this country is that too much of it has been attached to value destruction instead of value creation. And so what I'm trying to do with Aspiration is fix capitalism and do it the right way and direct the powers of the free market towards helping others and equipping others to take agency over their own lives and what they do with their own money. That's what capitalism could be. But that's not what it's been the last 30, 40 years.
So speaking of capitalism, it sounds like another thing that you've spent time on, Joe, is the earned income tax credit. For those who are not sort of tax aficionados, tax policy aficionados, what's the layman's description of the earned income tax credit?
It's a negative tax rate. It means that if you earn a low income, even if you don't owe any taxes, you get cash back.
And what were you noticing, that people weren't taking advantage of it, or that you felt like it was engineered kind of incorrectly? Like, what was your take on it?
Well, what I noticed is that California was one of the states without a state version of the earned income tax credit. So the earned income tax credit, EITC for short, has existed at the federal level for 40 years. And some states have state versions of it that supplement the federal earned income tax credit. California was not among those states. And it's one of many examples where at the surface, people think California is progressive, but in substance, no. It's quite a regressive state. It's a hard state. I would dare to say it's a terrible state for people who aren't rich. If we're being honest about it, if you don't have wealth in California, it's a really hard existence. And that might not be what California politicians say on Twitter, but that's the way that Californians are living every single day in real life. And so when I saw that the state did not have its own version of the earned income tax credit, that struck me as ridiculous. So I organized a lobbying campaign to get the state to create its own EITC. And that was in 2015.
Wow. And so tell us a little bit about that journey. Just hearing about having a state implement any new legislation sounds really daunting. Can you share a little bit about how it went down? Like, what did what happened?
Sure. Well, it's a lesson in good and bad, in that money has a lot of influence in politics. And the problem is money has been brought to bear on behalf of corporate interests instead of on behalf of those who are voiceless. So I hired effective, expensive lobbyists and asked them to do what they usually do for corporations on behalf of poor Californians. And, lo and behold, those same tactics that work for oil companies and tobacco companies work for low-income people as well. And that's really what we've tried to become, is we've become a lobbyist for poor people. And sometimes people say, oh, we're in the pocket of the big poor. And that's damn right. My special interest is poor people. And when we go to Sacramento, we lobby for poor people. And those are the people I'm trying to help. And everything I do is filtered through the lens of whether it's going to make life better and easier for low-income Californians and low-income Americans. So, I have an agenda when I lobby. And the problem is there are not enough other people who are lobbying with an agenda for working people. Most of the lobbyists are lobbying with an agenda, for big corporations.
What was that like when you were, I don't even know how that works. Do you put out like an RFP for lobbyists? Like what was that process like, finding one or a firm?
I researched who the main lobbyists are, and, you can figure out who is well regarded. And, I approach them and pitch them on using their skills on behalf of poor people instead of on behalf of corporations for this particular mandate. And, we got some great ones who did a great job on behalf of poor Californians, and the results speak for itself. But I think where we took it is even more interesting. Once we got the law passed, then we created a community organizing program that provides free tax prep to low-income Californians every year. And in doing so, we entered into a relationship with millions of low-income Californians, and then have organized those Californians to lobby the state for expansions of the earned income tax credit. So it began by a lobbying campaign oriented on the grass tops, if you will. Mm-hmm. And it's continued with a lobbying campaign that's been driven by the grassroots. So the original earned income tax credit in California was available for only 400,000 people. Now it's available for over 2 million people.
Wow. What is the eligibility, and what do they get if they're eligible?
You're eligible if you earn up to approximately $30,000 a year. The specific amount you get depends on how much you're earning and how many kids you have. But typical recipient might get $2,000 back from the state.
Annually. Yeah. And what does it cost to assemble the resources to get legislation like that passed, and how long did it take?
Well, it doesn't cost a fraction of the benefit it creates for millions of people. I probably spent $5 million in the initial year for advocacy and lobbying, And that original investment has resulted in dollars of money in the pockets of low-income people that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten.
Hey, Joe, unfortunately, the audio cut out right when you said the benefits. So it sounded like it cost $5 million. What were the benefits to the people?
Yeah, I was just saying we made an original investment of about $5 million in lobbying in the first year and in the organizing. And that's resulted in, several $1 billion of incremental money in the pockets of low-income people. So it's been the best investment, you could ever imagine, because the payoff is directly putting food on the table for low-income people. The way people use their earned income tax credit is to buy food, clothing, catch up on rent, life's basic needs.
How much of that is going on where kind of lobbying efforts for the people are being invested in? Because to your point, it sounds like an incredible ROI, and it is like how the system works. Are we seeing more and more of that, or is it like you're a lobbyist and then like 9 others for oil and whatever else?
Yeah,
is in that senator's waiting room.
It's still very uncommon, and one of the reasons why I'm glad to come on shows like yours and others is because I want to spread the word about what we've done so that people copy us. Because I gotta believe that if people know that you can generate this kind of incredible impact, look, we spent a lot of money to make this happen. I had no money growing up, so I value each dollar. And I also recognize to invest the amount we've invested to generate billions of dollars of impact is incredibly compelling. And I got to believe that if more people knew about this, more people would engage in this kind of change making.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, I was having a conversation a few months ago with Andrew Yang, and, he was talking about, we should have lobbyists that represent the people, advocate for things, like basic income. And I don't know how much Humanity Forward has pursued that, but it sounds like they should reach out to you if they're still working on it to get some, to trade some notes on best practices and stuff. Are you familiar with Yang's work?
I admire Andrew a lot, and he and I have exchanged notes over the years on Twitter, and I think the world of what he's done. And he's been a leader and a visionary in changing the conversation, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do next.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on earned income tax credit versus universal basic income. I think one of the arguments that the UBI advocates have offered is that, stuff that is means tested, generally, it can bring a stigma to it. Sometimes it has like kind of perverse incentives, and there's these cliffs where if you earn more than 30,000, then, you might be it may not be a rational move to actually get a better job in some cases. I'm curious, what are your thoughts as you hear some of this talk about basic income, while as someone who's been working in sort of anti-poverty measures for so long?
Well, I support universal basic income. I was one of the original signatories of the Economic Security Project that Chris Hughes launched. And I think that we have to pursue everything at the same time. The stakes are too high. We're talking about the lives of literally hundreds of millions of Americans who have no financial security and are one lost paycheck away from financial crisis. And so I think everything has to be on the table, and we shouldn't let the perfect get in the way of the good. And we don't have to choose. And I hope that what I've done testifies to that. I've publicly supported UBI, and I've pursued the earned income tax credit where it can be won. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And the earned income tax credit is not perfect. It has a lot of flaws, some of which you've just noted, just as every other program has a lot of flaws, which is why I think instead of debating where we should solely prioritize, we should do an above all approach. In some places where you can get the earned income tax credit expanded immediately, why should we not do that because it's not perfect. I mean, would I have loved to have a universal basic income in California right now? Hell yeah. But in the meanwhile, we've gotten billions of dollars into the pockets of low-income people who wouldn't have otherwise had that.
So I just moved to California in July. Previously, I was living in Europe, and then before that, I was in Washington State, where we didn't have any income tax. And now I'm in a place where we do have income tax. And I'm curious, where is all of the money going? Because it feels like I'm paying a lot in state taxes. And I'm just curious, like, shouldn't California be just crushing it in terms of quality of education and healthcare coverage? But it doesn't seem like we are. And I'm wondering, like, what's going on if you run the numbers? Like, where's all this money going?
Here's the problem that California has in funding itself. We collect way too little property taxes. And so we have to offset it with income taxes. So when you look at the total pie, income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, you end up with a total that's not that different than other states. But our property tax situation is so low and so disproportionately weighted to, frankly, younger people that it feels wrong. And that's why we have to change the property tax situation in California. You might be familiar with something that's a legacy of the 1970s called Prop 13, which basically froze in time certain assessments with maximum escalators. And the consequence of that has been to lock in extremely low tax bases of property that hasn't been sold. And so who does that advantage? It advantages baby boomers and people older than baby boomers. And it disincents turnover in the real estate market. And it disadvantages Gen Xers and millennials and Gen Z. And it causes the state to have to charge a lot more in income taxes. And it's an imbalance that has to be corrected. Otherwise, we're going to be on this continuous slippery slope into oblivion where young people can't buy houses, and everyone who's earning income is taxed through the moon to offset the lack of taxation that occurs on these massive property owners that are, frankly, it's a generational war where the baby boomers refuse to give up this massive tax advantage that's offset by extra taxes on Gen Xers and millennials.
What would you say? So I live in a neighborhood where there are folks like myself who've moved here recently and are paying a lot to live in California, in the Bay Area. And then, but I have really nice folks in our neighborhood who've been there for like 30, 40 years. And my sense is that if they had to pay a lot more in property tax, like relative to the actual value of the property, it's not clear that they would be able to afford it. And so they would reasonably argue like, hey, my family's been here for multiple generations. All of a sudden, all you tech people, started boosting up the property costs. And now I don't want to have to pay exorbitant taxes. Like I just want to stay in this neighborhood, like I've been for generations.
Those are legitimate concerns. And as is often the case, people think that we can't have nuance in public policy. There's no reason we can't accommodate for those concerns in how we change the rules to re-equilibrate the imbalance in taxation on real estate. So let's write rules so that people exactly like whom you've referenced aren't unfairly punished. On the other hand, what about corporations who've exploited Prop 13 loopholes to pay disproportionately low property taxes on their commercial properties? You know who one of the major beneficiaries has been of Prop 13? Oil companies.
Oh, wow.
Oil companies are some of the largest commercial real estate owners in the state of California. And as a result, have been some of the largest beneficiaries of Prop 13. So why can't we be smart enough to figure out how to fix this so that oil companies pay higher taxes, but we don't kick out of their community people like you've mentioned who understandably are concerned about this?
Joe, we are 16 days from, as we record this, we're 16 days from a very big milestone in American history, which will be the election of the next president to succeed Donald Trump, or for Donald Trump to have another 4 years in the White House. I would be remiss if we didn't talk about national issues for a moment before we wrap up. What are your thoughts on, every time there's a presidential election, they always say, well, this is the most important election of our lifetime. I think this time it kind of feels like that for me, but I'm curious from your vantage point, how are you interpreting things?
Well, I agree with you. We have to defeat Donald Trump, and I think we will. I think we're going to realize that, like everyone who exists, Donald Trump is human. And I think we've attributed on him this political genius that doesn't exist. And I think he's about to fall back to earth due to the force of political gravity. And then the next question is going to be, do we stay organized? Because democracy is not just elections, it's every single day maintaining a degree of pressure on your elected officials so they do the right thing. And we're going to get the kind of policies from a Biden-Harris administration that we organize for. If we go on vacation after the election and just rejoice in Biden's victory, then we should expect policy that's written by and for corporations. And if we want policy that's by and for the people, then we better be ready to work for it every day, week, and month of the Biden-Harris administration.
Yeah, I've heard that argument a lot, that we got to fight like the Dickens to win the general, but then once Biden wins, then we're going to to kind of keep them honest and really push them to deliver impact. Before we go on to sort of the pros and cons of Biden, let me address, or would love to hear your thoughts on an argument I've heard the president make, which is that because of his lower corporate taxes and reduced regulations on American energy production, in the town hall, the NBC town hall, he actually made the claim that he personally created 160 million jobs, which, by the way, is literally the number of employed people in America. So apparently, he's at least taking credit for all jobs that are around. I mean, but he does have a point that prior to COVID, the economy was growing, the stock market was setting records, and that a lot of people were coming out of poverty. Well, what's your take on that? Because some people could say, I agree with you, we need to do more, and that's why we should reelect Trump. They could make that argument.
I think it's preposterous. The stock market only tells you about the fortunes of the owners of businesses. That's it. Because the stock market gauges the value of the equity of companies, and the equity is owned by owners. And very few Americans own stocks. Certainly very few own it in any proportion that's significant. The economy is more unequal than it's ever been. We have more people who live paycheck to paycheck than we've ever had. That's before COVID. Racism is at an all-time high. Hate crimes against Jews and Muslims are at all-time highs. Hate crimes against Asian Americans are at all-time highs. Misogyny that's infected institutions has been unmitigated. Our standing in the world is at a low. We've failed to stand up to dictators and anti-democratic forces around the world. To quote Ronald Reagan's question that he asked in 1984, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? I think with the exception of a very tiny number of white male oligarchs in this country, nobody is better off than they were 4 years ago. And that's why I think Donald Trump's going to lose in 16 days.
What would you say to Trump supporters and who make the argument that, well, had it not been for Trump, we wouldn't have had all these companies start to hire again before COVID. And, I think he's made the argument that, companies have been pouring into the country because of the lower income taxes and building factories. And maybe not everybody owns stock, but when those stock prices go up, that means the companies have good prospects and they're going to hire more working class people.
Well, to build on the prior point, we can't also skip over the fact that the almost 1 out of 5 Americans who are Latino live in fear of ICE, which is, in my view, a domestic terrorist organization that Donald Trump has turned into an extra governmental administrator of his white nationalist racist policies. And to this refrain that things were a certain way before COVID. I mean, that's like saying, when I was 16 years old, I could jump higher. Like, the reality is COVID happened and I'm 41 years old, not 16. And Donald Trump administered the most ineffective, ignorant response to a pandemic or any crisis in American history. So, I don't think there is, except for COVID. We've had the worst response to this pandemic of any developed country in the entire world. It's not even close. And so Donald Trump doesn't get a free pass by saying, well, if it worked for COVID. And that's another reason, and I think it's a big reason that he's going to lose in 16 days. Frankly, to be fair, I think that if it weren't for COVID and his completely inept response to it, I don't know where the election would shake out. But the ineptitude of his response to COVID has no parallel in the history of this country. I mean, it's truly the utter incompetence of it is mind-blowing. And I think that as history is written and time passes, we'll probably learn that it was even more incompetent than it seemed at the time. So I think I don't think there is such a thing as except COVID. And I think that Donald Trump is going to lose in large part because of his COVID response being completely and utterly incompetent. There's there's nothing good you could say about it. Like, it's just mind-blowing how completely inept it was and willfully ignorant. So his supporters, and I engage in debates with them every day on Twitter I don't know why I do it, but I can't help myself. Now, they would say, oh, wait a minute, you're not being fair. Donald Trump banned travel from China in January, and he launched Operation Warp Speed. And by the way, it's a virus. Like, what's he supposed to do? Like, he can't, it's nothing. It's out of his control. I'll tell you what he should have done. He should have been honest with the American people. The number one trait of a great leader is honesty. Because I believe people rise to the expectations he set for them. And when you're honest with people, it confers a respect and dignity on your view of their capability to process the truth. And what he should have done is, in late February, he should have been truthful with the American people. He should have said, we have to have a mandatory mask mandate. Everyone has to wear masks. We're going to harness all of American industry to equip everyone with as many masks as we need. We're going to shut the economy down for a period of time. We're going to send you cash to get you through that period of time, and we're going to send you masks. And we're going to guarantee the payroll of companies for a period of time so that companies don't have to lay people off. That's it. If we had done that, we would have gone right back to where we were economically before COVID. It really wasn't any more complicated than that. We had the economic power and means to do so. Instead of the kind of half measure we did with the payroll protection program, we should have done a full measure and just said, payroll is guaranteed by the government for this period of time. Companies, you don't need to lay off anyone. National mask mandate. We get this thing under control. We would have been right back to business by June or July. The economy would be booming today. But he didn't want to, he didn't believe enough in the American people to tell us the truth. And I think it reveals what he thinks about all of us. He has disdain for us. You know, in his mind, all of us are the commoners that he's taking advantage of. And I think that the truth of that view towards all of us is what catalyzed his refraining from being honest with us about what we faced.
Now let's talk about Joe Biden. So I was on Joe's website a number of times and looking at his policy page. And I have to say, I was pretty impressed at the detail. And there's a lot of positions that are pretty progressive in terms of addressing climate and tax reform. And I'm curious, like, is it that you don't feel like he's going far enough, or you're concerned he may not follow through? Let's say we win the general and Biden's the president. What do you think will be the biggest concerns to make sure that he does what needs to be done for the country?
Well, have me back on in 17 days. For the next 16 days, Joe Biden is our path to defeating Donald Trump, and I'm all in. And I hope everyone, left, right, and center, is all in.
Now, I've talked to some folks who are expecting more and want more. And what they've said is, oh, well, Trump and Biden, they are two wings of the same corporate kind of bird. And that, you can't vote for either of them. You just have to send a message that, pox on both their houses kind of thing. And it sounds like you're in a different camp, but maybe you agree that that Biden will need to do more, but you're not ready to withdraw support for him on November 3rd.
I'm enthusiastically supporting Biden for president. I'm encouraging every one of my friends to get out and vote for him. And anyone who thinks that there's not a huge difference should go back to the 2000 election and talk to all the people who thought there was no difference between Al Gore and George W. Bush. And you know who can testify to the difference that existed between those two candidates? The hundreds of thousands of families whose lives have been ruined forever because they either lost family members in the Iraq War to death, or have family members who've been irreparably disabled by the Iraq War that never would have happened if Al Gore had been president. Ask the hundreds of millions of people who are affected by the climate crisis that is much worse than it would have been if Al Gore had been elected president. Who knows what alternate history, a better history, we would be living if Al Gore had been elected instead of George W. Bush. But Al Gore lost because a small number of people decided that they were two wings of the same corporate bird or whatever. It's completely unmoored in any sense of recent history. And I think it's morally reckless and is spoken from a place of terrible class privilege. And, I'd urge anyone who thinks that these two candidates, Biden and Trump, are one and the same, to just suspend disbelief and go and vote for Biden. And then after Biden's elected, you can, do all the organizing and all the criticizing you want. But there's a huge difference between, Trump, who's a neo-fascist, and, is Biden on every progressive issue the way I want him to be? No, but we at least have a chance, if he's president, to organize and influence him.
Yeah, and then there's also the 2022 elections where folks could try and advocate for way more progressive candidates in Congress and the Senate, and that could pull Biden further along if that's a concern that people have. So yeah, I tend to agree with you that I would be very concerned about the next crisis that the country encounters under a second Trump term. Like, to your point, he has not done a very good job with COVID. And so what about the next one? Like, basically, crisis management seems like it requires clarity, honesty, transparency, planning, execution, retaining talent. These are not things that we've seen Donald Trump excel at. And so I agree, like, as much as Biden was not my first choice, but people say, well, why are you voting for the lesser of two evils? I'm like, well, so am I supposed to vote for the greater of two evils? Like, how does this work? This is life. Like, you minimize maximum regret kind of thing. So I tend to agree with you, Joe. But tell me a little bit about, for people who really like what you're saying, who are intrigued by the nonprofit work, but also, is it Aspiration? Was that the for-profit one?
Aspiration.com. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more. Like, how can they find out more? What can they do to kind of stay connected with you and participate in some of the stuff you're working on?
Well, first of all, move your banking to Aspiration. Truly, one of the big opportunities that we haven't fully used as a movement is making sure that people's money are aligned with their values. For people listening or watching, I'd ask you this question. Do you know what your bank does with your money while you're asleep? And if your money is at one of the big banks, chances are your money is being lent to fossil fuel companies and gun companies and prison companies. Is that what you want your hard-earned money doing while you're asleep? And the answer is probably no. And that's why, if you care about these issues, you have to vote, you have to organize, and you have to align all of your decisions with your money and your values. So I hope you'll move to Aspiration. And of course, follow me on Twitter. My direct messages are open. And it's Joseph N. Sanberg, Sanberg.
Now, for Aspiration, some of the things that I would value, like I'm currently, like many people, a Wells Fargo customer. And I can't say I'm getting a lot of interest on my savings account.
Right.
But I do feel comfortable that they're insured, that there's security, that there's convenience if I need customer support. Tell us a little bit about where Aspiration kind of stacks up in terms of those like table stakes things that people want from their bank.
Your money with Aspiration is FDIC insured. You can deposit a check on your smartphone in the app using your camera. You can use one of 55,000 ATMs for free in the Allpoint network, which is more ATM access for free than Wells Fargo, Chase, and Bank of America combined. I have to say, just Google Wells Fargo and you'll see a lot of instances of all in the public record. And so I'd say Aspiration delivers you the basic table stakes and peace of mind that your money's will never be misused. We have a great Aspiration customer engagement team that's available on the phone. I think across the board, you'll be happier with Aspiration. And yeah, gosh, if you're at Wells Fargo, please take the time to switch. And by the way, who knows how many accounts they may have opened in your name without you knowing.
I know there were a few weird ones that a few years ago they fixed it, but apparently I had signed up for a bunch of products that I didn't really realize I had signed up for.
That's ridiculous. That should never be something you have to worry about.
Yeah, I guess my expectations are so low with banks that I'm like, oh, but maybe well, folks should check out Aspiration. It sounds like you can get your basics done, but then also know that some portion of your money is going towards good causes, and that your savings aren't being kind of loaned out to kind of nefarious causes or unsavory interests. So check out Aspiration, and then also for folks who are interested, make sure you follow Joe. And then the earned income tax credit stuff. Are you done with that, or is there more work on the earned income tax credit stuff?
Every year it's ongoing. You can learn more about the annual program at EITC4me.org. And you can volunteer, you can donate, you can learn more. And the fight continues. I'm not going to be satisfied with anything less than ending poverty. I don't know if I'll be able to achieve that in my life, but Martin Luther King had a great line in his Unfulfilled Dreams speech of March of 1968. And he said, one of the great agonies of life is we are constantly trying to finish that which is unfinishable. And I think one of the ways that we've fallen short in the last couple of decades is we've stopped trying to finish things that seem audacious. And my goal is to end poverty. Maybe that's an unfinishable goal in my lifetime, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't do everything I can to try.
Right on, Joe. Well, I'll just say amen to that, brother. And hope all of us can pitch in, and hope to get you back on when we can talk about what we want that Biden administration to do in about 17 days, or hopefully we'll know in 17 days, but certainly soon after. With that, I'm just going to thank you again for coming on the show and say goodbye, nerds.
Goodbye, nerds. Vote for Biden.
Please vote for Biden.
Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang, 2020. Gang, gang. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. I want 1,000 a month, 1,000 a month. Let's get this bread. Freedom dividend. Are all y'all paying attention? Automation gonna sweep the nation unless we get him in. Andrew Yang 2020 freedom dividend. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah. First we get this money, then on 420. He gonna give some high fives to some high guys. Decriminalize marijuana so we can smoke if we wanna. Down with the opioid trend, up with the mental health thing. Yeah. Math, yo, it's just math. Yo, it's simple math. Yo, can you do math? Yo. Eliminate super PACs, color stars making stacks. Student loan forgiveness plan.